So we're basically talking about sexuality and spirituality and the problems and issues facing the LGBT community, and how I think that art is the highest vibration level to represent the LGBT community. But do you think that sexuality is spiritual?
I absolutely think, I think they're the same thing. I think sexuality is spirituality. I think it depends on where it's directed and on what octave the energy is expressing itself, but I think they're identical. Same thing.
Do you think that sexuality is spiritual? Like, a lot of people just bring it down to the physical act, but don't you think that we all just want to connect?
I think sex is spirit. I think it is spiritual.
In what way?
Well, in the ultimate way, it's connecting with another person in such a way. I mean,
physically putting yourself inside another person, having another person inside you.
Yeah, and you're both sharing in the ultimate pleasures of the body, and presumably the mind connection and
the personality.
I mean, it should, yeah. I mean,
so why do you think people try to disconnect from that when they're having sex? Like you know, for instance, gay and straight people.
I think it's like a trend. I think it's like fashionable to, you know, you see it in porn, you see it outside of us so much that I think often people feel that you have to, or you not have to, but that's how you should sexualize other people, or that's how you should have sex.
The need to be loved, and then the need for primal sex has men and the different archetypes, and that's where the whole confusion comes in, right?
Well, I think that there are two main ways that sexual energy will express itself. And I think that one way is what I call archetypal sexuality, which has to do with being guided toward, in the sexual impulse, a particular kind of archetype. I think that we see this in both straight sexuality and in homosexual sexuality. So in the homosexual area, it will be the person that will only date the surfer boys.
The daddies.
Or somebody that wants to find a daddy. That's the impulse toward the archetype. And I think intimacy is the opposite of that form of sexuality. It's the contrasting energy. Intimacy is about wanting to explore, make love, connect with that individual particular person.
Why do we try to disconnect the intimacy? You know, you meet someone over the internet, you go have sex with them, there's all this whole disconnect.
Because physicality has become more important than the actual
the act of
connecting. The connecting becomes, to me, I think, more uncomfortable for people.
Do you think that disroots the gay community? Do you think it takes us away from
I think it can.
a higher purpose?
I think it also helps put a stereotype on gay people that we're
promiscuous.
Well, I mean, we are. The gay community is.
Yeah.
And maybe that's, you know, with people of the same sex know each other's bodies so well that that's a given.
Yeah. But I mean, straight people are promiscuous too.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's not that stigma.
Right. They're not fighting for acceptance the way we are.
No,
There's a whole level of shame at the very root of being gay, even coming out. We come out in nightclubs and bars. We're not able to tell our parents when we're 16 that we've just kissed the boy down the street, are we? So you're always carrying the shame like a secret around with you. And it's at the root of everything that we do throughout our life.
Yeah, I think growing up that's true. And then maybe it manifests itself when we grow up in how we socialize as gay people in clubs, that comes out in living these stereotypes.
I think one of the things that's exciting in terms of where we are in our sexual evolution is that there's the opportunity to both experience archetypal and intimate sexuality. So I think that there's an aspect where the longing for the archetypal sexual experience is actually a kind of narcissistic fulfillment of what I need to experience, a sense of arousal. But I also think even in that there's a deeper level, which is about a longing for a union with God.
Where do we fit in, though, the LGBT community?
We fit in as a daring reminder that you must be honest with yourself on some level, and that essence of who you are is not based strictly on procreation, that there's there's a spiritual reason for your existence that goes beyond that which is strictly biological.
Do you think the media is responsible for the image of the LGBT community and the people within the community believing what image they're sold by the media?
I'm not sure which comes first, the chicken or the egg. I think that I would say it comes from the community or the lack of community, because they don't quite know how they fit. Right now, it seems to me like the LGBT community is pretty separate in their need to identify themselves. And someday, I don't think it will matter if people are straight or gay. So right now, it just seems like they're trying to find their identity. And the media, I'm sure, exploits everything they can, and that's what they do. But I think that it's still coming from the individuals, because they don't quite, they're overcoming a long oppression.
There is no really high-profile LGBT people speaking about spirituality, is there? I mean, you do have out people like Anderson Cooper and Ellen, but they don't really speak about the problems really facing our community, like the gay community, like drug addiction, AIDS, sexual addiction, all that stuff. Why do you think all that stuff is swept under the carpet by society in relation to the LGBT community?
Well, I agree with Stephanie. I think that so much of the community is still very much in the infancy stage, or the adolescent stage, I guess, is actually more accurate. I think that because so many people in this community have fought against shame and bullying, that coming to terms with their choice of lifestyle has become the predominant feature. And so much of the gay culture revolves around lifestyle. And it's a lifestyle choice. Even in some ways more than a sexual orientation choice, it becomes a lifestyle choice. And I think that's the adolescent aspect of it.
Like the two aspects of sex, I understand that I was speaking to Kevin Jennings about. You have the primal aspect where you want to have sex, and then you have the intimacy aspect where you want to share your spirit, right? And the LGBT people are like teenagers, they're like adolescents. Like our community is not matured yet.
Well, also one might say that we are the elders. I think in every society, even Plato wrote that the love between men fosters ideas that people that are perpetuating the population can't enjoy. They don't have the luxury to sit around and talk about philosophy, and it's the homosexuality rite of passage that actually makes you in a philosopher's school. That's the essential element of it.
It's only when people begin to also understand the spiritual dimension of being gay or bisexual or transgender, that a deeper sort of undercurrent and a connection to history and an evolution in consciousness begins to emerge. And I think it's also very easy for society to have it be a lifestyle choice, because if somebody needs to have or maintain a certain lifestyle, there's a lot of stuff that you have to buy.
So by trying to be different, the LGBT, everyone ends up kind of becoming the same, right?
Yes. Well, I think that is part of the adolescence. And it's also a separation instead of a humanity coming together. But because homosexuality has been so sectioned off culturally, they do feel separate. But eventually, through evolution, I think it's all going to be accepted and integrated as humanity and not so sectioned off. People, I think that part of the problem is being identified by your sexual preference.
Do you identify as gay? You are gay, right?
I don't like to identify as gay.
Right.
I don't mean that in a negative way.
Right.
Like, I take pride in who I am as a person. I just don't like to compartmentalize, like, that defines who I am as a person.
Richard, talk to me about gay pride and being part of an LGBT community.
Well, gay pride is the celebration of difference that is celebrated, and acknowledgement that we can feel completely foreign and find our way home on some level. Find a home. You know, humans, the Jews ain't got nothing on us, sweetie, because they were like, yes, they've been cast out of every land too, but the gays have had it really rough. I mean, we've never been able to settle down in any sort of space and call our own. I mean, imagine, I think we need our own country. Like, you guys do your own thing over there, and while the earth is still here, we're going to go do this thing. But unfortunately, we don't quite get it, I think. There's a lot of immaturity in the gay community, and within myself as well. You know, huge shame-based sexual questions that made me... I look forward to what the next generation of gay and lesbian and transgender people do, because you'll have a straight population that is almost 100% on your side, at least in America, and you'll have other, coming out much earlier, and these things are happening much faster.
I remember a professor of mine in college who said that the one thing about human sexuality to always keep in mind is that human sexuality is a continuum. It's ever evolving. You know, when you really think about it, if someone were completely male or someone were totally female, they would be monstrous. They would be... I think that we all are varying blends of what we would traditionally look at as male and female. And I think that's also reflected in the nature of sexuality.
Do you think that transgender people are the third sex?
I think that they're the third sex, absolutely. Yes, I believe that they are the third in the Trinity. In other words, they complete the picture. Without them, we're doomed. Just like without women, we're doomed, and without men, we're doomed. Without homosexuals, we would have already died out as a culture. We would not have been smart enough to... That link that is not biologically designed, that can be stood apart and say, you're useless, you've done nothing, is the same energy that has made homosexuals produce some of the greatest artwork of all time. This whole thing, the transgender people are the most challenging and the most outspoken, even if they don't even speak about it amazingly. They are an incredible biological necessity to humanity as a whole. The effeminate male, the idea of the sissified male has always been, it's always a very uncomfortable thing for people unless they're being laughed at.
Why are LGBT people persecuted? Why all the fear and hatred?
The fear and the hatred exist to teach ourselves about ourselves, and homosexuals hold themselves in the face, and they say, I'm not afraid to say this is who I am. And it frightens people because humans are always looking for their tribal... They identify right now in all these tribal understandings that they're very possessive over. Over time, a global village will emerge in which people are all... it happens in every stage along the way. So homosexuals are at us being recognized as deserving rights as other human beings is a step in the consciousness of being free sexually, being reproductively independent.
If a little girl wants to wear tomboy clothes, that's okay. Why is it not okay for a little boy to wear a dress?
Well, I think that a little boy that is exploring his feminine aspect, in our culture, that's an identification with what's traditionally been regarded as the weaker sex. If a little girl wants to be in her tomboy phase, it's embraced and it's seen as being a phase, and that she's experiencing herself in relationship to the male world. I think that the real issue is the issue of misogyny, and I think that so many gay people are persecuted not because they're gay, but because of their identification with what we consider as a society to be more feminine-based values. So my experience of a lot of homophobia is that it's actually a misplaced mistrust or hatred of the feminine.
So femininity is frowned upon by society, and that is the underlying cause of homophobia?
Well, I think femininity is highly prized in women that objectify themselves on a sexual arena, but I think it's that men identifying with the feminine side is offensive to the straight male world.
So it's a basic human desire for every man to be submissive at one point or another. Why is it considered to be an ugly or a bad thing?
Ultimately, because women are considered the weaker sex, and it is undesirable in the culture for a man to identify outwardly with the weaker sex. Men are supposed to be strong, and they have to maintain their power to keep that illusion going. So it doesn't look good for men to identify with the weaker sex in a heterosexual model.
How do you feel about the way gay men treat one another?
Well,
Do you think it's just for gay men, or do you think it extends to all people, the way all people treat one another?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people are people. Whether you're gay or straight or whatever, there's always prejudice within communities.
What do you think are some of the bigger issues facing the LGBT community, like AIDS, addiction, bullying, cyberbullying, all this stuff?
Absolutely, but I'm more concerned about young gay people and them being having less fear about protecting themselves in sex. You know, they have less concern about HIV.
They think they can take a pill now and it will all go away.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. I remember when back in the 80s when AIDS was first coming out, it wasn't really clear what it was, but it was like a gay disease.
Yeah.
You know, we were all terrified, and we were all like, you know, feeling a little bit more closed.
Talk to me about AIDS, Stephanie. What do you think, dis-ease, what do you think AIDS is, and why do you think it hit the gay community so hard?
I'm not one of those people that believes that they deserved it. But I believe that rampant sexuality is always going to give somebody some kind of physical problem. And if you aren't conscious, then you have more possibility toward dis-ease.
Yeah, but don't you think that AIDS is also spiritual?
Well, we have to look at that, right? Because it's a disease through the blood, right? If we take the premise that somehow consciousness is also related to the physical body, then if it's showing up in the physical body, we have to pay attention. We have to look at what the imbalance is. I think it's unfortunate that younger gay people feel that AIDS is a manageable disease, or that it's curable or manageable through a drug regimen, because in a greater scheme of things, I think any disease is an opportunity to grow in wisdom and to look very deeply into the heart of the disease as a teacher. And if AIDS is being relegated to something that you can take a pill for, then I do think that there is both a disregard of history, and I think that there's a disregard of the tremendous ability that disease has to take us to a place of wisdom.
Do you think that all disease starts on a spiritual level and manifests itself into the physical?
Yeah, I do. I mean, everything is trying to find balance, and when things are out of balance, it manifests.
Anger, shame, it all has to go somewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that our desires often lead us in our decisions and choices in general, and if that becomes too strong, that we're just acting on desire alone.
And that's with no
thinking.
judgment. That is just a general statement. It's true that you have to have some level of self-control in your life, don't you?
Right, but on a societal level or in a group of people,
Yeah.
and in this case with gay people, I mean, sexuality becomes so free. I mean, you look throughout the ages, the Greeks, and I mean, there was rampant sexual, they were
Everyone was
engaged
doing
in
it.
so much sex.
Yeah.
And I think that that is maybe a tendency in human behavior, is to gravitate towards your desire if we don't also have some type of emotional intelligence.
I think the devastation that AIDS in this city has wrought, I mean, we lost a substantial part of an entire generation, a generation that would now be mentors, would be at the age where they were imparting their wisdom and their life experience. And I think we see that reflected through the arts. I think we see that in the theater. I think we see that in the industries of film, that an entire segment of a population was lost, a creative population was lost to a disease. And I think we're still in recovery mode, actually.
You spoke to me about another time. You come up with this concept called the Gay Avengers, where you said, what if the LGBT community rose up and took back the Sistine Chapel because there would be no Michelangelo, and took away the Nutcracker Suite because there'd be no Tchaikovsky, and Dorian Gray because there's no Oscar Wilde. So speak to me about art and LGBT.
Well, I think as people, that movie is based on the idea that as people realized that all of their great, or many of their great world inspirers of all time were gay, in fact, that there was a huge hidden homosexual population this whole time. And we've simply been written out of the history books. We've been written out of any sort of history of the world. We've been denied our rightful place. And I think that especially gay modern art is just getting on, just emerging, really. I mean, gay artists have been kept out of the mainstream art scene for the most part. Artwork has been censored and edited out. Very little homosexual art exists now. It's certainly not hanging in museums. It's not hanging on the walls of great, rich folks. It's not there.
Art is so important to the gay community, I feel, because it's a manifestation of everything we represent, but in a really beautiful, positive way.
Yeah, I mean, that's what art does in any community. It enables people to express very complicated feelings and thoughts that are nonverbal, and therefore
through sight, sound, taste, touch. Yeah,
much more understandable to other people.
And it makes an understanding of the gay community or the LGBT community more digestible to people who are not LGBT.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you. I think other people who it can, if it's done in a real honest, truthful way from an artist, it can express things that someone who's judgmental can have, their eyes can be opened.
Do you think that creativity comes from a sexual place?
Well, probably. I just never look at it that way. To me, it's always been more of an act of violence.
Sexuality?
Art. Creating art.
Wow.
It's an act of violence. It's, for me, it's I'm trying so hard to see and to be in the moment, and I don't want to lose that moment, and I am very physical when I paint.
Yeah.
So maybe that is, maybe there is a sexuality to the process.
A violent sexuality.
Kind of, maybe.
We've always been responsible for the entertainment and the joviality behind almost all human events of all time. I mean, we put the music in the music, we put the costumes on, we do everybody's hair, we do everybody's makeup. Even today,
Art is our survival mechanism.
Our survival mechanism is our art done at the hands of, knowing how to channel our artistic tendencies into something that the larger community will accept rather than persecute us or think we're irrelevant,
So has the underdog LGBT people have been creating art since the dawn of time?
Absolutely. I mean, what began as this has been going on for a long time. I don't think they're gay and lesbians like they are today. That's the thing. But the human psyche and the understanding of what it means to be gay has been gradually being explored for a long time. And we're living in a moment, I think, where it's a crux moment where we might finally figure out, or we might finally accept that homosexuals are a part, that they are indeed, and they will be able to then live free lives, marry each other, not be slaved, be included.
Do you think art is a means of unifying the LGBT community?
Well, art is an expression of whatever culture it comes out of, and art represents humanity, the humanity in all of us. So I think art is a really good way for the LGBT community to have recognition and expression and equality, and to really put themselves in that world stage, because art is something that is really valued and very sacred. The seed of sexuality, the seed of spirituality is all here, and this is your creative center. It's also, though, where you hold addiction, you hold control issues. So addiction to sex, or sex without spirituality, is like creativity going awry.
Art can heal a whole community, can't it?
Well, I think ultimately art is about souls touching souls. So the healing and transformative power of art is huge.
What do you think is the way forward for this community?
I really say the same thing about if it was any community, to be kind to one another, and through whatever angers we have, to be as gentle as possible, but to be strong.
In 150 years, will there even be need to use the word gay?
It will be less important that someone's gay. It will die out, as will the other, I think another form of humanity as we know it.
I think that time is going to help. I think that people having community goals, people working together, and dialogues in the community about not this going crazy kind of sexuality, but what they want as a whole to present to the world. And I think that will only come in time with maturity, because they're still in the infant stage of being on the world arena.
Where do you think we're headed, Kevin, the LGBT community? What do you think needs to be addressed? What do you think needs to be done so the LGBT community can actually evolve spiritually? And I don't mean in a religious God type of way. I mean in a way that we can treat each other better and love each other more.
I think that what helps that community to grow is a greater sense of maturity and taking responsibility for their choices and the ability to love and to be loved. So I think that there's a certain kind of seasoning and maturity that is the next step. Where do I think it's ultimately going? I think it's ultimately going in the direction that one day gay people, transgender people will be absolutely as much a part of the fabric and accepted in society as straight people are today. I think that's where we're going.
Yeah, I think that it's possible that the LGBT community won't be necessary, because everyone will be integrated when people recognize the humanity in everyone. That's where it has to go. But it's adolescent still.